I want to talk a little about learning. We're always trying to learn new things, hopefully. In my case, I'm utterly passionate about learning on a regular basis, and that's because I feel like it's the only thing keeping me in the game. When I was in college, for example, there were no personal computers capable of doing music. Writing music was pencil and paper, or recording onto analog tape. There were no phones that you could carry around and, make calls while you were walking down the street. There were no widely available synthesizers. MIDI hadn't even been invented yet. I couldn't have had a smart home. There were no modems. In other words, most of the stuff I now talk about on this channel hadn't yet been introduced, or in some cases, even invented. Last week I was in a session with 3 other folks, and the main client said to me, "How did you learn this contraption?" pointing to the computer. I said, "Well, I was trained as a composer." And she said, "No, this thing." It was interesting to tell her that I'm self-taught. Back when I learned this stuff, there was no schooling for it. It's been a while since I've even thought about that at all. Then she asked how the person who had found me for them knew about me. I said, "I teach people about using technology." And she found me from my YouTube channel, which is also something else that didn't exist at the time. I learned all this in my adulthood. Here's why I'm saying this. When I'm providing people with support in person or on YouTube, as I'm talking, sometimes I'll throw in a little knowledge in the middle that comes along the wayside. Here's the keyboard command for this. Here's how you might want to route that. Here's a trick about MIDI. A very common comment I get is that something I'm about to say is going to go over the receiver's head. I have one longtime person I work with who literally says, "I can't learn anything right now." Well, I'm here to say that I'm not expecting that everything that comes out of my mouth is going to be retained after the first telling. I mean, sometimes it's enough to learn something exists so that you can look back and say, Reed was mentioning this technique, trick, workflow, keyboard shortcut that I could use to do this thing I want to do. Then you figure out what that was. Give me a call, put a comment here, or just to be inspired, for instance, to say, wow, this program is deep. Why does an advertisement come on TV more than once? Because it takes a while to remember the thing being advertised even exists. Then you develop awareness of the product. Finally, you decide it's something you want to have. People a lot smarter than I am about marketing know this is how it works. Penetration comes through repetition. What I'm saying is that you don't have to instantly remember everything in order to benefit from hearing it. So Motu, right? When the pandemic came along, they set up a webinar series about Motu products, including my first call, DAW, Digital Performer, that has continued on a weekly basis to this day. That's over 3.5 years ago. It's free. I know a lot of DP users. I teach them a lot of things. And even though it's not economically in my best interest, I'm often recommending to these people that I'm helping to tune into these sessions. It's a Zoom call. Anyone can watch, and they also stream to Facebook. And I get the same thing. It'll go over my head, but there's no quiz. It's not a big deal. If you think back to how we really learn when we're children, that is the way it works anyway. When you're a kid and you're trying to learn how to walk, you just push through, right? You know you need to get around. You see other people walking. You think, wow, that's cool. And you don't even think the thought that you're in over your head. Let's assume this is you thinking this thought. Why are you thinking that now? Think about when a young someone gets their first job interning at a major recording studio. Happens less often now, but it's still something that does happen. Basically, they show some interest, a modicum of ability and personableness, and they're absorbed into the environment of the studio. What do they do first? They sweep up the studio, they clean the toilets. Then they get to zero out the board at the end of a session, set up mics, other easy stuff like that, which is very exciting when you first do it. And the point of this progression is to create an absorption, Obviously, of course, to test the chemistry of the new person and the studio, but it also facilitates the learning process. It's a culture. Recording studios don't suffer fools. There's a peer pressure in the system to be great, to keep learning, and there's a love for the music. These Motu webinars are culture also. You make friends, you talk about your work, the juices flow, people lend a helping hand, you learn how others are using their gear. Then, only after this groundwork is laid, the culture brings the knowledge, and it comes in fits and spurts. A lot of the stuff that you see in this environment goes over your head the first few times. And just like the child who's learning to walk, you're conquering this challenge because you have models, and you have inspiration from those models and from your own desire to do it. When I was a freshman in college, and I fantasized about being a prodigy, even when I struggled to read music, I used to think that if I could spend 10 years sequestered in a cave, I'd come out as a musical genius. Now I know I would have lost my mojo completely. Always look to hang with people that are doing it. You never stop learning as long as you're sticking with it. So my advice to you, drop that excuse. Now this video is for you and about you, but I'll quickly add a couple of thoughts from my own experience. 3 weeks ago, I filmed a video about a 9.1.6 Atmos system I encountered at the Audio Engineering Society's convention. I had just learned about it as I was wandering around with my camera. Coincidentally, that's also my phone, which I can say I was not imagining would also be my camera one day. How did I do that explainer video since I knew next to nothing about it before that day? Well, what I didn't do was say to myself, this topic is over my head, even though it was. I threw myself into the experience, starting first with the inspiration and the hang. Then I came home and studied, and only then could I speak somewhat authoritatively on the topic. I also have the faith that I can learn about the rest of it. By the way, link in the description to that video if you didn't see it. Another thought. DaVinci Resolve, the software that I edited this video on. I'm still a newbie. I studied videos on it. I edit these videos. That's how I've learned. But do you think I know the first thing about color correction? No. I still watch the videos about color correction though. The first few, I did not understand at all, not a word. But then these things started sticking. In the video I just mentioned, for the first time, I brightened up a few dark scenes when we're in the Atmos room, and it worked great. My first successful color correcting moment. And I'll be doing amazing things in the future unless I get in my own way before I've had the opportunity to let it sink in. Bonus tip, keep in mind that you've got the biggest ingredient needed for the subject matter, your taste. If you're learning and your thought is, I suck at this, it's because you know what not sucking is. Just don't let that get in your own way, because you've got what it takes if you have a vision. You're in a spot where it's going over your head? Don't resist. You're in the right place, my friend. Welcome.